Okay, here we go. I promised a video of the layout, an updated one. I'm going to start out at the brick Santa Fe station, which represents McPherson, which about half the layout is modeled after McPherson, Kansas. Move along here, some power poles, the crossings. All of this I built several years ago when I was in Longmont, Colorado, and I couldn't give it up, so I moved it. The Quonset Hut, although it's in the wrong place at the moment, kind of, is also a feature of McPherson and has been there for probably over 50 years. When I look at air photos and such, it was there when I was living in McPherson, and 40 years later when I went back in 2018, it was still there. This is now twisted around the yard in McPherson. The back 3 tracks are basically, well, actually the back 2 tracks are basically the yard tracks, and then there's the main, and then these 2 tracks are the storage tracks. The one closest to us is also known as the stock track because there used to be stock pens on it. And this little sign right here, they were all over the place, and I only noticed them in the photographs I took when I was in McPherson. So what we've got, I literally blew it up until I could print it and cut it out, and there are at least 6 of those on the layout. Back there, there's a turntable which didn't exist in McPherson. I just thought it was cool. And the sand tower. The sand tower, kind of a tribute to, now I can't remember Barry's last name, but he worked on the Kansas and Oklahoma Railroad, which took over operations there in McPherson, and I asked him how they got sand in the locomotives, and basically he said they bagged it, took bags and poured it in. I can't imagine lifting bags of sand up to fill the locomotive with sand. That just seems incredible to me. So I made a sand tower just for you, Barry. Let's see, the grain elevator here, which is not fit. Nothing is truly finished here. Was there, had the WR on it, McPherson, for Wall-Rogowski Milling, which is probably the major customer in McPherson, and probably still is. Again, that comes out of my pictures. Let's see, then here we go around here. More of the yard, the Kansas Pacific and the Arkansas Valley cars. One, I started a long time ago calling my model railroad Kansas Pacific. It's been through a lot of changes since I started that, but I still do that. And Anthony, again, I forget the last name, was somebody else that was using Kansas Pacific. He and I traded a lot of emails, and through him I got some decals and decaled a couple of cars to look like it. The Arkansas Valley actually kind of has a family connection. Arkansas Valley was a interurban line from Wichita to Hutchinson, Kansas, and going through Newton, Kansas. and Halstead. Halstead's the name to remember. That's where my mother's family, actually my grandmother's family, was. And over on the wall, I have a certificate, a membership certificate in a union for the Arkansas Valley Interurban that was for my great or great uncle who worked for them. I don't really know how long. He was, I guess, 96 when he died in 1966, so he's been gone a long time. And here we go. This is what would be the west end of the yard. And there's the duck under with a duck on it to remind people to duck under. Nothing terribly special about it. Over here in the corner are some customers for the railroad. The lumber yard, Golden Belt lumber yard, and what I'm calling Wildcat Milling, which is a completely fictitious thing that I made up because I wanted to be able to use the Wildcat mascot thing, which was basically the logo used by Kansas State University when I was in school there. And then we come down, and there's another Kansas Pacific covered hopper. Back off a little bit. Come down along here, nothing going on much here. The truck parked there. Now we're getting to this station that has no name. I'm kind of calling it Rock Island Station. Actually, the station itself is something I scratch built from some basic plans from the Union Pacific Historical Society website. So, and it's modified from those plans to make it a little smaller. One of the things I want to do is replace it with the Rock Island model of the Rock Island Depot that was actually in McPherson. And there's a little SW1 switcher. I have pictures of an SW1 sitting on the house track by the Rock Island Depot in McPherson. And that's kind of the inspiration for that. Actually, I have, again, another one of those projects that's not finished, a actual model of that particular switcher. And here we go. Now then, the creek, the idea was modeled after a bridge on the Santa Fe that was just off the west end of the yard in McPherson. This is another piece, small piece of the layout. Let's see if you can see. Well, basically from here over to here is a piece that I cut out of one of my sections in Longmont and brought with me because I liked it too much to give it up. It used to reside, like I said, it would more properly be where the lift out is. And come around this corner, and I'm slowly working on a project that has no relationship to McPherson, but goes back to Longmont. I'm trying to create a pond here, and that's turned into kind of a struggle. But the tall pole you see in the back there will eventually have a nest and a couple of osprey in it, which was something that we enjoyed in Longmont. There were osprey around there, and there was a nest that was pretty accessible, actually, kind of like this, sat next to a pond, and it was on the fairgrounds, Boulder County Fairgrounds. But that was a very interesting and ongoing thing. And there's a rack I'm using for tools, clearly, and some other junk. And then we get around here, and just a house. And that house is more or less like the house lived in Longmont. I put it on here because it's perfectly appropriate for it to be in McPherson. And at the time I lived there, there was a house in that location. This is Elm Street, which would have been the street I lived on in McPherson. And now then we're going to start back into the business end of the tracks in McPherson. The falling over block wall in the back is a building that was there when I lived there and is still there. I used to walk to work because I worked downtown. I worked in the post office building, had an office on the second floor of the post office building. And I would walk to work, and I walked by across this railroad crossing, 5 days a week. And then we get into the main part of the WR milling. And yeah, I've done this. In a sense, I've done it backwards, but it's actually the way it was and I tried to represent the various aspects of that. And there were 2 tracks arranged more or less like that. And they loaded out flour as nearly as I could ever tell in bags. And here's obviously the back of the Wall Rogaski mill and elevator there. More down the tracks, and you can see where that is. It looks like right at the moment most of my car collection is sitting here because I've been working in other places. And here we go into the corner, one of the places that I'm still trying to figure out how to scenic. I want to make it kind of town-like. I won't say city-like, but town-like. I have to put in a donut place. That's kind of an inside joke at our house. There's a reason for that. Also, the little drive-through Chinese restaurant that's another unfinished project, but it needs a place. We used to go to Panda Express all the time in Longmont, and there isn't one here in Grand Junction, so there's supposed to be one coming, which would be good, but this is kind of related to that. Then we go down here and we're back into more accurate representation of McPherson. The 2 elevators over there actually represent elevators that were actually there when I lived there. I think they're both completely gone now in this day and age. Another road, don't remember the name of that street. This loading dock and intermodal terminal was actually there. And so I had to model that somehow. And yes, there were trailers parked over mostly on the east side of the depot. And so now then we're back around to the depot. And yep, they used to park a locomotive out there. The depot today isn't there, wasn't there when I lived there. That's one of my what if kind of things. I have imagined that they restored the old county seat depot rather than tear it down, which they did in the early 60s. And then they built a really ugly square thing that was still attached to the freight house that's back there. And then the caboose sitting there actually was a caboose like that sitting on the